I have a secret that I don't really like to admit, but I've been playing Overwatch since Overwatch 1 Season 2, and I grinded thousands and thousands of hours to achieve a high rank in Overwatch. But when I really look back on all the time I spent, most of those hours were terribly inefficient. These days, the way I approach improving at games is far more efficient, and if I could have incorporated these techniques when I started, I would have gotten good much faster and would be better today. So how exactly would I learn Overwatch if I could start over? Now, it says that less than 20% of you are subscribed. We've been doing a lot to improve our content, and if you enjoyed that, press that subscribe button. Now, in any higher level learning, there are two main types of knowledge. Breadth specifically refers to full span knowledge of a subject. Depth refers to the extent which specific topics are focused upon, amplified, and explored. These are super important as the building blocks for your knowledge on any subject, because without breadth, you limit your learning rate and knowledge ceiling with depth. In Overwatch terms, breadth would be the wide knowledge that you can learn generally. This could be relayed as map knowledge, role knowledge, game mode knowledge, general strat knowledge like pushing and retreating and things like that. But for depth, this would be very specific hero interactions, very specific matchups and how you would play them, a deep understanding of the meta, and deep understanding in your heroes' weaknesses and strengths. Basically, breadth is the foundation of general knowledge in Overwatch, and depth is the expertise in one particular vector inside Overwatch. The interesting thing here is that in Overwatch, there is a certain diminishing return on both depth and breadth as far as using your time most effectively, which if I could go back in time, I would need to balance these perfectly to improve the most I could in the fastest rate. Breadth is fundamental and to be used as a stepping stone of knowledge that all depth is built on top of. This is why if I could go back to the beginning, I would spend a good amount of time only learning and focusing on breadth. This means trying every hero, taking in the game as a whole, not focusing on any one thing or any one mistake in my play, but instead just trying to learn the playground, the sandbox itself. You see, I did this wrong right off the bat when I originally started playing, because when I started playing, I saw Genji, I liked Genji, and I basically spent all of my time in the beginning, maybe 100, 200 hours, only playing Genji without getting the full picture of the game. And it's very easy to lock yourself into that pattern. That being said, though, you can't stay in the breadth stage forever or trying to expand your breadth indefinitely, because this eventually becomes incredibly inefficient when we consider the time spent / impact ratio, which I just randomly came up with. If we never learn anything deep about any one hero or specific interactions, we will only ever be a generalist, and our ceiling of impact will always be limited. For example, think about our best and most talented sports athletes. While they have learned the game in a broad sense, no athlete plays all positions. If we think about our famous inventors, no inventor has advanced knowledge in every single science. That being said, both of these groups will have knowledge of every other sector. Point guards will know what a center does and what's expected of them. Physicists will know the general expertise of a job of a chemist. They have their own depth of advanced knowledge in their specific fields, but they have the general breadth of knowledge that really allows them to see the big picture of things and connect things together and connect ideas across different types of knowledge. Now, if you jump into Overwatch and don't spend enough time in breadth, you'll never understand the connection between your eventual expertise and the game as a whole. This is why breadth is really important and not something to skip. If I could go back, the first thing that I would do is take in the game holistically and not only play DPS or certain characters and not lock myself into any preconceived belief at the start. It would also be really important for me to accept that there are many things that I don't know, but embrace the exploration and discovery of as many things as possible. Now, like I said, you can't do this forever, because if you do, you limit your improvement rate, and more importantly, you limit your overall skill ceiling. That's why if I could go back, I would eventually move on to depth, which means that you intentionally start to remove yourself from as many variables as possible. It's the exact opposite of the previous section. Think of this like an advanced PhD degree in which you are learning only about a very niche and specific knowledge subset. In Overwatch terms, this means that you're intentionally capping what you're learning to focus on very small things in detail. This includes things like limiting the role you're playing to only one, limiting your hero pool to as small as you can get away with, and even limiting your mechanical practice to only be the mechanical things that you need to focus on that have to do with your hero. If you're playing only tracking heroes, you're practicing your tracking. If you're playing Widowmaker, you're practicing a very specific type of aim. The idea here is that you are double downing on the things that your characters need, limiting the roles and characters you're playing so that you can better focus on the depth of your knowledge within those set things and the depth of your skill within those set things. Everything is done for the sake of furthering my depth of skill and knowledge in a very small category and not learning more about the game in a broad sense anymore. I will also not be interested in becoming a specialist in 5+ heroes or the many roles because it would be a really huge waste of time and, more importantly, limits my time spent pursuing the skill ceiling in one specific specialty. Now, if we go back to that sports analogy, a star athlete in one sport rarely ever moves to another and becomes a star there. The only time that it ever makes sense at all is if you were already somehow the peak of the first sport you were playing. So unless you're freaking Bo Jackson, it makes more sense to go to a higher ceiling and not a broader one. Who cares if you made varsity on 3 sports when you could have made the Olympics in 1? Now, that being said, the interesting thing here is the reason I'm a good coach, self-proclaimed, is because I spent a crazy additional amount of time pursuing a ton of different character depths. I would get to a certain level of skill and a certain level of depth with the character, and instead of pushing that further, I would move on to another one and another one and another one, and it made me understand the game in a very broad sense and have deep knowledge in some regards, at least compared to the masses, but it took me thousands and thousands of hours to do so, where if I just look at my best heroes, I actually could have gotten even better than my current peak in skill on those heroes in less than 1/10 of my total effective time, maybe even less than 1/20th if I would have prioritized what time I was spending. Now, to close out this idea, you should expand and enjoy the game in a very broad sense originally, but eventually you need to remove every variable and focus your time on specific optimizations. The broad knowledge will be used as a vector to springboard you when you isolate your learning, and you will improve at a faster rate than ever before. Now that we're in the depth learning section and we're really trying to become the best we possibly can at a hero or a couple of heroes as quickly as possible, what I should have implemented is limit testing. Limit testing is the act of finding the absolute most you can do or quote-unquote get away with in a game. How greedy can you be? How aggressive can you be and get away with it? If there is a safe and fundamental way to play a hero or a role, limit testing is finding the way where you can break those rules to do more or get more impact. As an example, this is finding out how aggressive you could be on Ana and dealing damage instead of healing. What is the cost? Where is the line that you should draw? The art of limit testing is when you are indecisive, always err on the side of aggression. Now recognize that during this state, you will fail and die a lot. You will be too aggressive and die, or not heal enough and your team dies, or take too much space alone as a tank and die alone. Limit testing is throwing aside the desire to win and instead embracing the desire to dominate. Winning or losing doesn't matter. I want to be as oppressive as I can to the enemy. I want to do the most I possibly can. I want to be the greatest player they've ever faced. I want to pursue only dominance. Now, it's important to understand that in the pursuit of this, you will not always win, but that's okay. This is a trial and error stage where you learn the limits of what you are capable of and what is possible. You will not play like this forever, but in this process, you will learn at a very rapid rate. While plays are working or failing, you will also learn your own lack of skill. Are there mechanical things that you could do to make that play work in the future? Is it a failure of understanding? You see, far too many players find ways to bring a certain fine amount of value and just idle there. This is how someone gets hard stuck. If you aren't reaching or aiming to do more, then you rarely will. Now, the best example of this concept is actually from an anime called Jujutsu Kaisen. There's a specific scene where a teacher is having a conversation with, let's say, a student. And they just got out of playing a baseball game as a group, and the student in question went for a bunt play, which, if you don't know what that is, it's the most low-risk, safest way to get guaranteed value for your team. Now, the teacher basically proclaimed to the student that the other players, especially the ones that were willing to go for the home run, even at the risk of failure, were going to far surpass him. And the reason was not because he made the wrong play. He helped his team, he did something fundamental. The reason is that he never imagined a better version of himself. He understood his skill, he understood what he could do, and he made sure to never go beyond that or never try for things that weren't guaranteed. But you got to understand that in the attempt, in the effort, in the process of reaching for things that are beyond your current abilities, that is a way to push yourself beyond your current abilities. That's why limit testing is so important, and building that healthy ego is so important, because it's going to be the thing that drives you to become better and better, and it's going to be the thing that enables you to achieve a much better, more talented version of yourself. But that being said, after you've lived in this unreserved gameplay loop of limit testing for quite some time, you are not only better than you were by a far margin, but you know exactly where you lack. Is your mechanics lagging behind? Are there plays that you went for, but if you were a little bit sharper, a little bit mechanically better, you could have pulled off? You'll know exactly what those are. You'll have a very specific hero pool that you could focus on, and you know what you need to do to grind those mechanics to be better, because you have practical understanding of the plays you went for and failed, and where those mechanics could have bridged that gap to make that play a reality. In addition to that, you could have game sense problems. Maybe there was interactions where you got killed, or matchups you don't know. You just don't know how to play. If you always play passive and never limit test, sometimes you don't even know what questions to ask to get answers to. But if you limit test, those questions will come to you face first. Your failures of understanding will be revealed to you right in front of you, and you'll very easily know, that's what I need to focus on. That's what I need to do. That's what I need to get better at. That's what I need to learn. And it's another thing that's going to propel your game sense forward. And ultimately, what you're developing in this stage is not only figuring out what you need to work on and start to grind those things and get better at those things, but you're also developing that controlled ego. You know your limits, and you can adjust your skill to start to expand those natural limits. But you're always looking for moments to disregard your proven skill and go for plays that on paper you might not be able to pull off. This is no longer just openly random limit testing, because you generally know your limits, but it's often tipping over that line and moving that line over time, just like you're rebuilding a muscle that you injured. Remember that there's always a higher peak and a higher goal, and you should never get complacent with your own skill, and you should always start to envision or imagine yourself being better and going for plays based off that better version of yourself. I truly believe that if I would have applied these things when I first started, I would have gotten better at Overwatch in a small fraction of the time, and you can as well. But let me know if you have any questions down below. Smash the like, subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.